Paranormal King Radio Network, bringing you the best paranormal hosts and guests, bringing you the best paranormal shows and features, playing the top musical artists from around the world. Paranormal King Radio Network. With the best paranormal hosts and guests. The best in paranormal shows and features. Playing the best musical artists from around the world. Paranormal King Radio Network. The paranormal will never be the same.
You are listening to Paranormalities and Ponderings with the C.A.S.P.I.R Paranormal team. Brought to you by the Paranormal King Radio Network and hosted by Frank Lee. Join us for the next hour as we discuss ghosts, spirits, hauntings, and otherworldly phenomena that has yet to be explained in hopes of finding answers. This show is meant to be a resource for those of you who, like us, seek to find answers to the unknown. We hope you find it informative and enjoy the show. And once again, thank you for listening.
Hi everybody, welcome to Paranormalities and Ponderings. I'm your host Frank Lee. Thank you for tuning in tonight. I'd like to welcome you to the show. And you'll have to bear with me tonight. I'm dealing with a cold that I'm just getting over, so if I sound a little not like myself, that's why. So we've got a great show planned for you tonight. We've got a very special guest for you. His name is Bill Sweet. He is a researcher with the Spindrift organization. They do a lot of research with prayer and the science behind it, the scientific study of it. So it's going to be fascinating for us. So, Bill, welcome to the show. How are you tonight?
Well, I'm real happy that we're on the air. And as you know, a half an hour ago I called you from the neighbor's phone, and because my phone wasn't working, so I'm talking to you from my sister's place instead of my place, which is an illustration of sometimes things seem to sabotage us from getting information out.
Right, and I think we'll probably do our next episode on gremlins.
That's what we should do.
I think we encountered a few tonight.
Yeah, for sure. It's very interesting. I've seen it before, but not that close to the minute.
Right.
And what happened was about half an hour before he called you, I was on the phone with a friend, and they couldn't hear me anymore, and then it went blank, and that was the end of it. I couldn't, my phone didn't work. It was pretty good. And I happen to also believe that there are more and more experiments that people are doing to show that thought does affect machinery. It's a very interesting area of telekinesis, how thought can affect things. And of course, some of your people are familiar with random number generators.
Yes.
Thought could order to random numbers.
Mm-hmm.
And in our Spindrift group, the people who started Spindrift were a father and son team out here in the Chicago area named Bruce and John Klingbeil. And they worked professionally as Christian Science practitioners, so they were very involved in healing. And they were also amateur scientists. And they did all kinds of experiments with the effects of thought and prayer on plants and the thought and prayer on the effect of certain things about machinery, too, in subtle ways. And they were, in 1977, did some of the early work with random number generators. They were pioneers in this area. You don't hear about it, but they were working with them way back when. And if someone is interested in seeing what the results of that showed, they can go to the Spindrift website, which is spindriftresearch.org, and go to experiments, and you can see our experiments there, but if you go 2 or 3 down, you'll see the random number experiments, and how it is a little different, what prayer does to random numbers versus just giving attention with unconscious thought. So your listeners might find that very fascinating.
Well, I know I was overlooking the Spindrift website, and it was fascinating. I've and what I was seeing was where they've actually put out formulas regarding the scientific research of prayers, and I mean they've broken it down to that level of specifics, and I
Yeah.
was very fascinated with it.
Yes, they attribute different values to different elements of thought, and you can get into some of the mathematics of that. They write about it very deeply. Beyond what's, well, actually, no, I'll tell you what. People are very want to know about the mathematics and really what goes into it. If you go to the documents page, the last thing at the bottom is called the Spindrift Papers, kind of a takeoff on the X-File or the Pelican Papers or something. And the Spindrift Papers are the real scientific write-ups and data and mathematics of the experiments, including the mathematics of that we're talking about here, the equations for thought and the equations that go into various aspects of consciousness. I probably should tell you what some of those are. I'm just saying those out in the air. There's a lot of things you deal with in thought. You deal with resistance. You deal with the quality of thought that's being put out. You deal with the non-quality aspect of thought. There's a quality thought and there's a non-quality thought. And these things are bouncing around our consciousness all the time. And they're combating for the same space and same priority to be primary. That's something we have to battle a lot with spirituality. What's taking over our ego of non-quality thoughts or real quality thoughts that are spiritual thoughts that flow. Then there's other things that enter into it too. The amount of attention. If you can, more attention you give to something, more you can focus on it, and that can be put into the equations too. And then also a term that the Spindrift founders, Bruce and John Klingbeil, made up called associational linkage. This is a very interesting study. It's in quantum physics they would call it entanglement, and Rupert Sheldrake would call it morphogenic fields. But with our Spindrift research, we find this term very helpful. Associational linkage. It has to do with how you hook up with your thought to what you're giving the most attention to and praying for. The more information that you know about what you're praying about, the more that you are sure that the target is what you're focusing on, the stronger is the associational linkage, which sets up a pathway then for your split thoughts and the prayers to follow and hit the target. And that's a very, and of course there's interference along the line too, so you've got to find ways to clean that up, interference. And this gets in to the advice that Jesus gives about the secret of prayer. And people say, what's the secret of prayer? Well, the secret of prayer is what Jesus says. He says, go into your closet, close the door, and pray in secret. Don't let anybody know what you're doing, because when you do that, you are right away averting a lot of the interference that will come about. If people don't know what you're doing, that's your best way to pray. And that's Jesus' advice. That's the secret to prayer. And today in our society, it's very hard to have any kind of privacy at all. And Spindrift makes the joke that the last thing left for privacy are your holy prayers to God in the closet. That's about it. That's probably the only thing they can't spy on. Maybe they'll find a way to spy on that too. You know?
Right. Well,
but as long as we can keep the channel clear, we have a stronger associational linkage will have more effect.
well,
If people want to read about associational linkage, if they go to the FAQ page on the Spindrift website, spindriftresearch.org, it's the third question down about associational linkage. That is a fascinating study just by itself.
Well, and it really comes as as not very much of a surprise to me to see the results uh, of the studies and the research, because we've seen the results from parapsychology, from where the effects of collective consciousness, collective focus. We've seen where even focus and directed thought could even have. They did a recent study, and it showed an actual change in molecular structure.
Sure.
And there's been countless studies on
Well, priest praying for the blessing water, that showed
right,
the water molecules change on some level. So, I mean, these things are really fascinating. Now, I'll tell you, frankly, what is really interesting is that when these things come on the news, you would think they would make a big splash, wouldn't you?
right.
Well, you know why they don't? It's because of this collective and individual defense mechanisms out there. They won't let us get this information out. So there's a lot of exciting things that happen in consciousness and prayer research, but it doesn't, a few of us get real excited about it, but a lot of people, they hear it and for a temporary time, they're excited about it, then it's completely blacked out or it's diminished and they're on to the next thing. This is the part of the Spindrift study too, is how people have dramatic psychic experiences and dramatic UFO experiences and dramatic spiritual healings, or they could even have just what you might call more moderate ones or modest experiences, but they're still paranormal. And except for a few people who persist in remembering them and keeping track of them, it almost just completely disappears from people's experiences. It's the defense mechanisms of the mind. It can be other things too, something working against us. But our defense mechanisms tend to not want us to get too involved in paranormal things, either hyper-religious things or strong paranormal things, because the defense mechanisms see these things as not conducive to having normal lives and taking care of our families and going to work every day, because they sidetrack us. So it's a very interesting. There have been some really great. I mean, the things that have happened in parapsychology, and then you hear the mainline scientists say, "Oh, there's no repeatable experiment. And parapsychology hasn't shown anything." People always say that. Well, there is anything scientific. There's all kinds of stuff out there.
Absolutely.
So they're wrong. But their minds are telling no, there aren't. There isn't anything. There's quite a body of work out there, really, if you look. So it's kind of a fascinating thing. Now, this doesn't happen too much in other things in life, like baseball or sports or music. I mean, those things I guess, aren't as strange to the defense, but when it comes to the paranormal, man, you just get every kind of thing in the world dismissing it.
Right, and exactly like you said, I agree 100% that the proof is out there, because there's been so many times. I mean, all the way back. You can look at so many from Hans Holzer, from you've got so many of your famous parapsychologists that have done all of all these experiments, all this research, and they have shown there's even been poltergeist activity created in a lab environment.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
That's really fascinating.
And it's absolutely amazing, and yet it's like mainstream science turns a blind eye to that, when it's not very hard to find it and find it documented by reputable scientists.
Yes. And I'll give you an example of that. A very well-known parapsychologist told me that he happened to be invited, maybe it was a mistake, he was invited to give a talk at a mainline conference. And he was grateful. Maybe they regretted it later, but one of the speakers was the guy, his name was Wheeler. He was one of the guys who, in quantum physics, that discovered the observer effect, which has given a lot of open area for parapsychology and prayer research, the idea that you can observe something and affect it. You know that the observer effect in quantum physics, you're familiar with that,
yes.
Right? You might call it something else. It actually involves this entanglement again. But it's the collapse of the wave function and all this. So anyway, he's the guy who really started it out. And for some reason, when he got up to give his talk, he said, I want to start out by saying that I completely deny this, that there's any credibility to anything parapsychological in what I've done. Couldn't believe it. I frankly couldn't believe it. He went out of his way to say that, maybe because of his reputation or whatever. He went out of his way to distance himself from everything parapsychological. Mm-hmm. And isn't that talking about defense mechanisms, or the left hand not knowing what the right hand's doing, or having some other agenda? Isn't that wild?
So, and at that point, you have to really ask yourself, is this person truly not seeing the research or not seeing the value of the research? Or is this a defense mechanism for ego?
I think it's both of those things, plus he's probably worried about his reputation.
Right.
Because I've talked to scientists at conferences that say, in their speeches and to their colleagues, they dismiss this stuff, but they talk to me personally and they say they believe it, but they can't tell other people. I think in this case he probably was really a disbeliever, but I have talked to people that tell me something completely different than what they say publicly.
Right.
Maybe you have run into that too. I mean, it's happened to me a number of times. I wonder if some of your listeners have had that experience. It's happening so many times. I've run into this happen to other people. In other words, there's a thing in psychology where sometimes somebody will share something with a stranger that they won't share with a friend. It's a strange thing. How many people, like that, and they'll tell me things that they wouldn't dare tell somebody they actually knew well. It's a funny thing, and I've had to happen so many times that I say, gosh, there probably are a lot more people in mainline science that believe these things, but when they put their scientist hat on, they say they don't. Or during the time that they're doing their research, they don't. But maybe when they're home, they do a little research. Maybe there's something to this, but they kind of switch back and forth. It's really an interesting sociological phenomenon.
Absolutely, that is something that we find, and from
Come to think of it, I'm sorry, I just thought of this. So wasn't there a mayor in Arizona or Phoenix or something? When they had the UFOs down there, and he completely made fun of the thing. Then once he got out of office, he said he actually believed in UFOs, but he made fun of it when he was mayor. You remember something like that?
It sounds familiar.
I wonder if your listeners remember. In other words, when he had the hat on as a mayor, this is a big joke and what a hoax, But once he got out of office, he's a believer. So I'm believing these things. Huh, weird.
Right. Well, and we actually had, of course, you might remember this. Jimmy Carter actually reported a UFO.
You know what? And it hurt his credibility. Mm-hmm. People I thought poorly of him because of that. That's too bad, isn't it?
That is. And something that I've seen from the paranormal investigation side of the house is some of our clients we've had clients that held political offices somewhere in professional positions such as doctors, lawyers, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And the amount of confidentiality that we had to keep for them was unreal, because they were terrified of anyone finding out, hey, we had a paranormal team coming out to see if my house is haunted. Yeah. I can't have any of my colleagues find out that I think my house is haunted.
Yes. This is the sociology of the paranormal. It's as fascinating as the experiments themselves. In fact, as you know, I have a book out about the Spindrift Research and about prayer research and about consciousness and parapsychology. It's called A Journey into Prayer, Pioneers of Prayer in the Laboratory, Agents of Science or Satan. Originally, I was just going to have to be the title, Agents of Science or Satan, because people either think we are doing the scientific work, or they think we're doing the work of Satan because we're testing sacred subjects. Right. So, but anyway, that title covers it all. But in A Journey into Prayer, the people who have bought the book, including skeptics, have been more fascinated with the wild resistance to the experiments than the experiments themselves. In other words, the sociology involved. and all the drama involved around the experiments is more a selling point, more of an interesting aspect than the experiments. It's kind of a funny thing, if it bleeds, it leads kind of thing,
Right.
And it's just sort of interesting, and it is fascinating because I run into we actually have had at Spindrift too several people who support us, but they don't want their names associated with it. Just they can't go public with their names. But then again, there are other people that are already out there and they're glad to put their names. But some people just can't do it, and I don't know that the whole thing fascinates me. I got to tell you a funny thing. In one of the chapters of my book, I have a quote that actually happened to me. I explained Spindrift to a friend of mine, and he's trying to be the nicest guy in the world. I'm explaining this Spindrift, and when I was done, he said, "Bill, it sounds like you're speaking about some interesting ideas there, but I think they should be worked out in therapy first." The judge's book, I was so good, I had to put it in. He was trying so hard. And, I just think we just have to accept in the paranormal area when we're interested. People are going to think we're kooks. We just can't worry about it. Just have to start out as a premise. Well, people think of us that way, and that's okay. Can't let it bother us and move ahead.
Right. And one thing about it is the research you're doing. When a lot of times when people hear the word prayer, they automatically want to shift toward the religion side of the house, and they think, well, prayer and science can't meet. That can't be put together, and it's
the it's just that's it. You can't do it.
Right, and
so they don't look into it.
Right, but if you look at parapsychology, if you look at basic human psychology, and just if you take anything paranormal out of the equation, if you take it out, just the ambiguity factor, the power of suggestion in itself. You could be a complete skeptic, you could be a complete non-believer, complete skeptic, not believe it for a minute. You could still look at just the human element of it and see where there would be quite a bit of effectiveness there. And so then when you add in the paranormal element to it, the fact is that human consciousness does have abilities that surpass our own physical body. The psychokinesis, telepathy, different E.S.P., certain abilities that aren't limited to within our physical touch.
You could just say epiphanies. People have epiphanies they can't explain.
Exactly. And you add those into the equation, and you throw that into just the power of suggestion. Like I'd mentioned earlier, and then that's going to bring about an epiphany in itself. And so then as you back up a little bit more and you look into not just one person having this experience, but then you look into concentrated consciousness and group consciousness. And I mean, the possibilities start snowballing very quickly. I mean, it builds up and expands. It's really mind-blowing if you look at it from that viewpoint.
You did a wonderful job there. I do cover this in a similar way, or an overlapping way, in my book. I can remember what chapter it is. I think it's chapter 3. But basically, you can talk to people about their experiences, and so they're all with you. But then when you get it down to, how about if we take those in the laboratory and see if there is something to it, but in a psychic way or a spiritual way, then you've crossed the red line. And all of a sudden, this wall goes up, and they're not with you anymore. you know.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can lead them into the psychological, there's the power of suggestion, there's the placebo effect. People have these epiphanies, and they're all with you, and they're all with you. But then you get a little too scientific about testing it and everything, and looking at it deeply to really see if there's something there or not. Oh, man, so watch out, you know. Don't investigate that too deep, but you can talk about it, you can believe it, and you can do a general investigation, like, you know, write it down, okay, I had this experience, but to really look into it, watch out. It's really fascinating. I've seen that happen many times, you know. I'll be leading somebody along, I said, should I stop here? They're agreeing with me, then I'll take the next step, and I've gone one step too far, you know.
Right.
It's funny. And you can get people too, Frank, to tell about their experiences. You know, they basically kind of contradict themselves. They basically describe to you their dramatic spiritual and psychic experiences, and then they say, "Well, what if we look at that a little more deeply?" Oh no, can't do that. I don't believe in that. You know, and it's strange. I think that's part of, in psychology they call it approach avoidance in a way. John Klingbeil, the son, there's Bruce and John Klingbeil, who started Spindrift. John had an experience once where he met with a friend of his, was a full-time Christian minister, and what he was worried about the test. He said, "You can, you know, it's fine you're doing the test, but what if you find out that prayer doesn't work?" And John was startled. You know, here this whole guy's dedicated his whole life to prayer, and then if you test it, then what are you going to find out? It doesn't work. And he's been using it all this time, but now that you're going to look under the microscope a little bit, maybe you're going to find it doesn't work. I've never been able to get my mind wrapped around that, but it might explain why some people are fear of the scientific process. You know,
Right.
Yeah, why? I mean, you've had these experiences. You know, we may have to do a lot of finagling and a lot of experiments to find a way to test it. But to start with the premise that we might find out it doesn't work, or there's nothing there. Wow, that's really weird. So in other words, you want to just operate in the your whole life on belief without really understanding if it's true or not. That's very strange, don't you think?
I would agree, and now I understand that the Klingbeils they were Christians who moved into the science arena.
Yeah, they were Christian Science practitioners. Christian Science is compared to mainline Christianity, Christian Science is is considered a fringe religion.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm a Christian Scientist too, and I like it. I like fringy things, but I think that in time it will be recognized as a contributor to science and religion. It's going to take a long time.
And that is something that over recent years has been argued as the fact that you hear the argument of, well, no true scientist can be religious.
Right.
But if you
this
look
is one of those memes. This is one of those memes you hear over and over again.
Right, but if you look at some of the scientists throughout history who were very devout in their religion,
right,
it's fascinating.
Well, we live in a culture that's either or. You believe something or don't believe something. You forget it, and you forget about the guy on the other side. The skeptics, you know, they just think that those scientists were deluded, and they have all kinds of excuses for it. Then they'll show you their statistics that the majority of really, really top scientists are atheists. They'll give you that line. Then you can go over and say, wait a minute. Then you can go over and find all kinds of scientists that are believers. This happens in the magic area too. People who are magicians and skeptics make a big deal that you won't find a magician who's a believer in God or a believer in anything paranormal. It's all can be done through magic. Well, that just isn't true. There's a whole website that lists people who are believers in God and are professional magicians. But it's an either or thing. You either believe it, you just don't see the other side. You just can't see the other side of the coin. That in itself is a thing. There's the phrase that if you pick up a hammer, everything you look at looks like a nail. So if you're a skeptic, everything you see in life is skeptical and untrue. It doesn't matter what it is. And they say, show me some evidence, and they show me evidence, but I don't accept the evidence. And the believer listens to the atheist. He can't understand the atheist, even though the atheists, actually keep believers on their toes, because the atheists bring up some pretty intelligent arguments sometimes. So we should listen to them and see what they are. I was thrown off by an atheist friend of mine just recently. I'm still working on a question he asked me. Maybe your listeners haven't answered this. I really was left me wondering, how am I going to answer that? He said in the Ten Commandments, it says, "Have no gods before me, because I'm a jealous God." He said, "Now how can God be jealous?"
Right.
That throws me. I don't quite know how to answer. I got to think about that one. He got me there. And I'll tell you a funny story too. We have in Chicago, and I had to go there to believe it. We have an atheist church. They love everything about religion. They have a church, they have stained glass windows, they have a Sunday morning service, they have a collection, they sing, they have a sermon, they have a Sunday school, but they don't believe in God. How do you like that? That's something.
I think that's about the biggest oxymoron I think I've ever heard.
Yeah, I had to go see it to believe it. Well, they like everything about church except the Creator. They still like the form of it. And one of my friends who's an outright true atheist said he's going to go there sometime and pick at him. Calls them chicken atheists. Isn't that funny? I had to go to see it.
That is awesome.
Yeah, it really is something. So when people come to Chicago, they're going to have to visit that place.
But you know, when I've heard that argument, I I can't help but I have no idea how many people, how many are the full list. But no, I know for a fact that Francis Bacon, the father of the scientific method, the one who laid it out,
Mm-hmm.
was a Christian scientist.
Yeah.
I know that Galileo was a Christian scientist who ended up facing the Inquisition because he was the one who brought forth the idea that, hey, the Earth is not the center of the universe.
Yeah, and he had to have house arrest. And I might have to throw in here, too. Chapter 7 of my book is about all the crazy hate mail, all the crazy things that have happened to Spindrift. And we had that almost a parallel thing happen. We had a minister that was actually participating in our experiments and loved what we were doing and saw the results of his prayers and tests and was telling people about it. He got called in by his other ministers, and they made him sign a paper saying that it's impossible to test the power of God through prayer in a laboratory. He had to sign that or he's going to lose his job.
Wow.
So there's Galileo today. Can you believe that? Something like that would happen? And that happened in the 20th century, not the 21st century. Isn't that something? That's wild, isn't it?
That is, and it would seem to me like it would be exactly the opposite. But
yeah, let's explore it and see what happens.
So,
but then again, that's the sociology of Spindrift. But the experiments, I always thought they would fascinate people. But you never know how things happen. It's interesting how people are interested in different things, and time will tell what's going to happen in the future. I mean, there's even the possibility that negative prayer and dark prayer may be the thing that will trigger science to look into it, because we have so much negative prayer now with the Islamic terrorists praying everything before they do things. That it could very well be that negative dark prayers will be the thing that will trigger looking into prayer. How ironic could that be?
right. Well, and I remember reading on the site that there was even some warnings that were put out pre 9/11.
Oh, now you're. Did you just think of that, or did you see the stuff I sent you?
That's from some of the information I seen on the website there on Spindrift Research.
Yes, yeah. I would say that in historical terms, what may actually trigger what you brought out there will be that Spindrift, when we tested people from different religions, when we looked into Islam way back when, in the late 80s, early 90s, I have to admit we were biased. We just couldn't figure out how we could test this thing. People jumping up and down and everything. And then we got some translated prayers from Arabic into English of some of their darker prayers. And my gosh, they were horrid. Kill, maim, and one was about wanted eternally to tear people's spinal cords out and put it back and turn out for eternity. Put it back, turn them out for eternity. So you had this constant torture.
Wow.
And we tried to warn people about it. We should pay attention to these people. I mean, I think most people thought, oh, they're just talking about the Jewish people. No, they were talking about Americans and infidels, and I think historically, Spindrift will get a maybe a footnote that they tried to warn people, this is serious stuff. And of course, when 9/11 happened, people saw their home. 9/11 was all started with prayers.
Right.
I mean, it's people don't really take that serious. I think it's a little bit like the paranormal stuff. You can't see it. It's you're talking about invisible things, whereas they can see the towers falling down, or something like that. But they don't. They don't see that was all built on the unconscious level first, built up in thought and prayer to get yourself motivated to do those things. And
absolutely,
that's what we really need to look at that. And I'm talking about the unconscious mind, subconscious mind. I might tell you too that we found that to improve your prayers, what you're doing is you're cultivating your unconscious thought. It's not a conscious effort you make. And everything that when we learn skills humanly, we consciously do them, and of course we know how the brain works and everything, that these things, skills, gradually get remembered in the unconscious mind. So next time you do them, you remember how to do them. Well, they're all coming up from the unconscious mind. Well, spiritual things and psychic things, for the most part, work that way to a larger extent. It's what's going on in your unconscious mind, the subconscious mind, directly relates to how much ability you have to pray or how much ability you have to be a psychic person. So really, we have to understand more about what's going on under there, because that's where the real psychic and spiritual action is taking place. And I think that I don't know if it's true or not. I have not had any experiments with it, but I understand that autistic children have psychic ability, quite a bit of psychic ability. Have you ever heard that?
I have, and I have actually worked with several.
Well, tell me about it, because I haven't.
And in the cases that I've worked with, it does seem from the cases I've worked with, it does seem that they have an increased perception.
I think it's because they can't do much consciously, because conscious is chaos, so it has to be going on a lot more activity going on another level.
Right. What it seems like to me, and this is just from the cases that I've dealt with. I'm not sure what the official research shows on a grand scale where it's over thousands, but from the personal cases I've encountered, it shows where, of course, with when you get into cases where there's autism, maybe Asperger's syndrome, which is very similar to a high-functioning form of autism. Their cognitive development of their social skills in a lot of ways is slowed very much, and in a lot of ways their development with some of their they work more off emotion. Now they're very brilliant. I have yet to meet one of these children that was not just amazingly intelligent. As far as, I mean,
so they had a cultivated consciousness,
right? But they use their right brain so much more, and it's like that. That's why you'll never hear me refer to autism as a disability, because some of the things that I've seen working with it in some of these cases just blows my mind. It's
okay. Well, I'm glad I asked the right person.
Right.
So you understand what I'm saying? That is that they've done. It may, on the conscious level, it may look like there's some problems, but they've rewired it to the unconscious mind. And
right.
So there's a lot of good things that can happen with that.
Right.
What I'm trying to say is a lot of our spirituality, a lot of our psychic ability comes from this unconscious area. And if we could cultivate that more, we could have more of it come out of the conscious world. Because we're always making, in our culture, conscious efforts. It's not really our conscious efforts, it's our unconscious efforts. This area that was hard to understand is where the action is.
Hmm. And I very firmly believe that they are much more sensitive to perceptions that the average person blocks out, and maybe
How did
people
you
that
happen to be working with them?
well, both from my personal life, and I've encountered several cases in the paranormal field that
Wow.
involved.
Okay, so there's something to what I've heard. There's something to what I've heard
Yes,
about that. Oh,
definitely.
wow, that's really something. Well, this is sort of exciting.
Definitely. I will definitely vouch for that because it's like I say, I don't have that grand scale research where it encompasses thousands, but I've encountered quite a few, and it they never cease to amaze me. There's for instance, there's a study, and I can't remember his name to save my life. There is one who, if I'm not mistaken, he's from somewhere in the UK. I want to say he's British. He plays the piano. He's blind and autistic, and he can hear a song one time, and he is autistic to the point where his skills of communication are, not very developed. He barely
Mm-hmm.
speaks, but he can hear a song one time,
Mm-hmm.
play it perfectly, note for note on the piano. He's never taken music lessons, plays completely by ear, but he can duplicate it with such accuracy that it is mind blowing, and he will never forget it.
This wasn't autism, but when I was in high school, uh, we had a terrific time in high school. It was probably the greatest experience I ever went to. Some of your listeners probably heard Neutral High School. It's about 13th in the country now, but at the time I was there, it was the number one high school for public high school. And we had a ham radio class, and I got my ham radio license while I was in high school and active in ham radio. I'm sure some of your listeners are hams. And we had a guy at New Trier who he could have two radios on, and he could hear two Morse code signals. And he was ambidextrous, and he could sit there and he could write two messages out with his left and his right hand, two separate things in Morse code simultaneously.
Wow.
It's hard enough to do one, but this guy could sit there and he could write out two things, two separate messages coming over the radios in Morse code. I mean, that was spooky to watch.
Wow.
Can you imagine the wiring in his brain?
Well, I know I spent several years in the army, and it was all I could do to keep up with Morse code. Period. And that's I can't tell you how many times. I'll admit it. I never completely learned it. I had to keep a cheat sheet. So
Uh-huh.
that, but to be able to send
Well,
out.
it's a lot of fun. I have to practice to keep it up. But we're supposed to ham it. Of course, if there's ever a total disaster, the only thing that will get through will be Morse code. It's the only thing that can pierce a nuclear cloud or something like
Right.
that. And the talking about Morse code, or at least ham radio, one of my favorite movies, and it has paranormal all over it, was a movie called Frequency. Did you or any of your friends ever see that movie?
Frequency. That is that the one with
Dennis Quaid.
Yes, Dennis Quaid, and
He's playing his father and the son. He plays both parts, I think. And he's
he's a firefighter.
right.
And
Exactly.
yes, I know exactly which movie you're talking. Excellent movie, but for those that,
Oh,
but please
okay.
describe it for those that haven't seen it, because that
Well,
is
it
an
has a
awesome
ham
movie.
radio theme. The father was a ham radio operator, and when he passed away, his son got his equipment. some kind of woo-woo happens in the atmosphere, and he's able to talk to his father from the past.
Yes,
So
it was a
communicating with his
sunspot.
father.
That's what it was. It was a sunspot, and it was at the same time that they're experiencing accelerated activity through the aurora borealis, is what it was. Because the sunspot mixed with the aurora borealis was interfering with everyone's communications. I remember that, and it was causing freak occurrences with everything,
He was tying
phones.
the past and the present together, and it was so cool because he could tell his father to quit smoking in the past, and so he would. Then by the end of the movie, he's alive. He didn't pass away with him because he'd given up smoking. It was really clever, but you had to go through many other things too. There were
Right.
the father was in an accident. Whatever you do, and if you have that, if you see this happening, this accident happening, whatever you do, instead of turning left, turn right this time. So I just saved your life that one. So they were able to correct mistakes through this communication from the past to the present. What I liked about it was is that we all wish we had second chances and things. Oh, gee, if I could only do that over again, I would. I would have helped this person. There's a lot of empathy in that movie. Because we all have those feelings. Gee, what if I could have done this or I could have done that? So you stayed with the movie theme all the way through. That was a paranormal movie, not so much a paranormal movie, but talking about the unconscious mind and skills. Another thing I liked was this Born Identity, the first one. Well, they're all good, but the first one with Matt Damon. Remember that? He had an accident. He forgot who he was. Yet every time he got into a tight spot, skills would emerge that he didn't even know he had.
Yes.
Karate skills and all kinds of doing intelligent things to escape and survive. Well, he didn't know where they were coming from. Well, they were coming from his unconscious mind because he had learned all these skill sets and they were there. He was not in the conscious mind, but they were all there and they surfaced when they needed them. And I thought that was really cool because this kind of relates to the prayer research and psychic research too. If we build up our consciousness with spiritual thoughts and keep on feeding good things into our unconscious mind, they're like skills, and they'll be there when we need them.
Yes, absolutely. And something that you had mentioned earlier about the dark prayers
Unbelievable. Yes, we tested dark prayers too.
Is when you were mentioning that, I couldn't help but think that how you mentioned how the dark prayers seem to be a precursor to some incidents like 9/11, and God only knows how many other tragic occurrences throughout history. But you can't help but wonder if would it not be what an analogy for that for anyone who isn't tracking what you're saying, who thinks that sounds maybe preposterous.
Well, there was
what
an
if you think
example
about
of this.
what if you think about a poltergeist? A poltergeist being a physical manifestation of one person's thoughts and emotions that subconsciously physically manifest and causes physical harm, physical attacks on those around them, and oftentimes even that person themselves.
We all know people that are maybe not that traumatic always, but we all have experienced somebody walks in the room and it just throws everything off. You can have a real fun conversation going, and then this negative person comes in with a dark consciousness. All of a sudden, there's like a switch. The place gets cooler. The conversation drops off. It's not intelligent or fun anymore. Somebody brings these dark thoughts in the room and just throws everything off. So then there's also this term I'm sure you've heard. Was it vampire? What's people are called vampires or something? Thought vampires or what?
Right.
Yeah, thought vampires. Is that it? Something like that. They come in and they suck everything out of you. So you just really don't want to be around people like that. They suck your energy. I think it's called energy vampires.
Yes.
You don't want to be around people like that. So there's people who can come in. Yes, I've seen it happen. You can have a real harmonious situation, and somebody will come in and they'll screw it up. I even wonder what happened here with this phone call before we went on the air. I don't have that one figured out. It was strange. Gotta give it credit for that, wasn't it?
That was, of course, it might be my fault. I didn't do my weekly Skype voodoo dance.
Oh, is that right?
Right. I've learned to do it after show of technical difficulties, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm recovering from a weekend of being sick and everything, and I just let myself slip, and I think it got
Oh,
the
I
best of
see.
me.
Oh, yeah. Well, we all know what that's like. We all know what that's like. Well, we want you to get back to normal.
Right.
And you're moving in that direction of normal now, right? Getting back to your norms.
Oh yes, I was just about back to normal, so getting there
Oh,
slowly
that's
but
good.
surely. So
Yeah, that's great. Well, the movies teach us a lot. I find that the movies are very instructive, and the more empathy they have, the more you identify with it, the more you pay attention to them. And that could be very powerful. And uh, yeah, the power. These people who produce these effects, power-based effects, are they generally bad people, or are they just people that put them in a certain context and they become bad? It's only in a certain context where they're just that way generally.
well, that's a good question.
I mean, there's some people that are negative
Hmm.
all the time. And then
Right.
there's other people that if you corner them, it's the wrong. It's a certain set of circumstances.
Right.
All the bad comes out. It's kind of like the subject of money. You want to bring the worst out of anybody to talk about money.
Right.
That brings the worst out of anybody. It's kind of that. I wonder if there's situations where you bring the worst out of people.
Hmm.
Yeah, where they really do start bringing out the demons and stuff. In other words, what sets it off?
Hmm.
Any ideas on that? Like in the
I
laboratory example you gave, they must have brought a guy in who was able to turn it on, turn it off, or something.
I it, if I remember right, they let me see. I would have to overlook I would have to overlook it again. Or excuse me, look it over again.
Yeah.
um,
No, that's funny what
it's
you said. That the defense mechanisms would have us overlook it again.
right, right,
Whereas we're alert, we want to look it over again. Just the opposite.
right,
That's a cute little turn of phrase.
right. Um,
I think I'll ignore that again. No, that's your defense mechanism talking.
that um, I, if I can recall correctly, the way that they had set it up, and don't quote me on this, but
Mhm.
if I recall it correctly, the way that they did it was it was a group of people who were just normal people, but they were instructed focus it to focus as much negative thought as they could
Oh, is that right? They didn't
directed
bring
in.
people in that were already
Right,
good at it. Oh,
right.
that's interesting. No, that really is interesting. Well, by the way, this thing I just said about ignoring it, it reminded me of a story. This is apparently a true story. Galileo's looking through the telescope that he invented. He's looking up at the stars, and a bishop from the church walks in, Catholic Church. He says, "Hey, Galileo says, here, come over here. Look, I can show you the planets up there. You can see them." And the bishop said, "I don't want to see." Yeah.
Right. so so
it,
basically turning a blind eye, quite, you know.
yeah. And I think that it's not just skepticism. I think, like I said earlier, I think there are people that actually believe in uh, psychic and spiritual phenomena, but it comes to a point where they don't want to look into it anymore. They, you just something happens. I don't want to know anymore. It goes cold. Everything, every real warm up to the point, then it goes cold. It's very interesting. So it's like, don't push me. Don't push anymore. That's it. It's just the way it is. Um, The other thing is about prayer. We've taken people in the laboratory, and we found that there's people that have, which are just, for the sake of not going into what it's involved, they just basically have good spiritual thoughts, so they get good spiritual results. And you have other people who come in, and unintentionally, they're good people, just unintentionally, they have an agenda in their subconscious mind of what they think is best for the situation. So even though they're sincerely praying and trying to do the best for something, unintentionally they're actually harming the plant because they're pushing it around psychically, but it's not going in the directions in meeting the norms of what's needed. So they are having an effect on it, but not necessarily what's in the best interest of the plant. So that's kind of like unintentional harm. Then you have people you bring in the laboratory that do intentional harm. They just seem to have a lot of darkness in them, or they just have a lot of ability in it to turn, do either positive or negative. But we've had people come in and just destroy plants and destroy what's going on with their thoughts. So, and then there's also people that don't get any results, at least not in our experience, they don't show any results. But it is interesting to see the difference between unintentional harm and intentional harm.
Yes.
And you wonder, these people who do intentional harm, wow, it's really something. And it's kind of scary because it does seem that it is easier to misdirect a prayer than to direct it properly. So it's harder to get the spiritual result than it is to get any other kind of result. It's just like anything else. It's easier to write down 2 times 2 is 5, 2 times 2 is 10, 2 times 2 is 12 than to get the right answer. It's because there's so many answers that are wrong that you could put at the end of the equation. There's only one that's right, so it's hard to get that, just hit that one that's right when you got all these other variables going on.
And something that most investigators will say is pretty much all of us have encountered those situations where we go into a residential case, for instance, and we find a lot of negative activity. And we tell people that, they need to have some form of faith, whether it be Christian, whether it be whatever, they need to have some foundation of faith, and they need to, and you see this even in the movies, a good point that was brought out in the chat room was the movie The Exorcist was really about the power of prayer. And it
was a tough sell. It was a tough sell in that movie because so much was working against it.
Yes. And that, we're constantly telling people, you've got to, we even seen like Ed and Lorraine Warren, they constantly told that to their clients, that they stress the importance of some type of foundation of faith, how critical that was, how much of an empowerment that was for the people who were in those situations. And, there's, like I say, the prayers for protection for people in those situations. But, what about, we've talked a lot about, the Christian prayers, Christian researchers, but have you found differences in prayer results from maybe other religions, from, say...
Well, that's funny you said that. Before I got into research, the Spindrift Research, started way back in 1969. They didn't know what was going to happen, so when I started testing people from different religions, they thought maybe Jewish prayers would be different from Baptist prayers, and Baptist prayers would be different from Buddhist prayers, and Hindu prayers would be different from Methodist prayers and Catholic prayers. And that, they didn't know. I mean, it sounds funny, but they didn't know what tested it. And what they found was, at least in our research, maybe someday they will actually find differences between the way different religions produce effects through prayer. But what the Spindrift Research showed, that it had nothing to do with the denomination you belong to. It had more to do with the quality of thought, the spirituality and the unconscious mind that we were talking about earlier. Were you able to convey this, elicit this, bring it out, project it into the environment and have an effect? And so it had to do more with the quality of the person than the beliefs or the dogma. And some people have very loving thoughts, no matter what, and have very spiritual thoughts, no matter what, and they can convey it. And that's the type of person we were really interested in finding. We were able to find people in different religions who could do that. And that overrides doing harm, by the way. When you have enough of that good quality and spirituality and love going, it overrides doing unintentional or intentional harm. You can really make that the primary thought. And so it doesn't matter. You can be religious and spiritual and maybe still do harm and things, but it had to do with, are you really developing these qualities of thought to coincide with what you consciously believe religiously? That make sure they're in alignment. And when we found people like that, we thought that was sort of a fascinating thing. So we could categorize people by the effects they got with their prayer. People who were getting consistent results on the spiritual side, or people who were getting consistent results on unintentional harm side or the intentional harm side. And the first question on the FAQ page on the spindriftresearch.org, the very first question deals with this, the different effects from prayer, if people want to see that. The very first question deals with what we call goal-directed prayer, which is also called petitionary prayer, and non-goal-directed prayer, which we call thy will be done prayer, which is more of a spiritual prayer. And that's the one we really want to achieve. It's okay to have goals. The trouble is that our goals usually get mixed in with our material desires and gets things messed up very quickly that way. It happens to all of us. It happens to me.
Right.
It's very easy to do.
So really,
we all want things. It's just a natural human desire. But the trouble is sometimes what we want is not in our best interest.
Right. So basically, from what you found, it wasn't the religion of the person who was praying that seemed to matter much at all, as it was the quality
of their thought.
Right. Yeah. So their intentions, their okay.
So we would hope that their religion would teach them things so they could input that to their unconscious life. Let's hope that they're learning the things in religion that would help nourish their thought.
Right.
Sometimes people separate that out. They study religion, but they don't really take it to heart. They don't absorb it. I think they are, but there's a disconnect between what they believe and what they're expressing through their prayers. And so that brings up a whole big controversy, too, about the research. The research shows that's kind of scary to people. It scares people. They don't want to see what their prayers do if they don't go in the right direction.
Right.
But they should use it as a learning experience. I would think people who want to know these things, but not generally. They generally don't.
No, I have to ask, has Spindrift studied much of the psychological effects of prayer?
Yes. I hope I can answer your question. This is what comes to my mind to answer with that question. The people have been startled by what they've seen from the results, and that's chased some people away. Other people say, well, now I see it's very important what I think because I'm affecting things around me. This puts a great responsibility on my shoulder. And some people like the responsibility. Other people, they feel burdened by it. They wish they didn't know that thought had such an effect. Because now they're responsible for checking their thought because everyone's under the belief of the mean that we hear in our society that what you do in private can't affect anybody else, or what you do is you're on an island by yourself. Every man's on an island, unless or something. Or no, what is the thing? No man's on an island. I guess that's true. No man's on an island. The fact of the matter is, there is really no way to isolate yourself from your environment. You're having an effect on it, and that scares people finding out. That's good. Puts a great burden on people. One of our people who's been very helpful to Spindrift, nuclear engineer that I know, who's also a paranormal investigator, told me that he thought that one of the reasons there was such resistance to Spindrift was that if people actually found out that their thoughts and prayers and paranormal abilities were real, that they would be very worried because they would have all kinds of responsibility for themselves that they didn't have before, and they didn't want to actually find that out. It's kind of an interesting deduction.
Right. Right. So basically, from your research, you found that people need to make sure that they're keeping themselves emotionally, psychologically balanced, because it's not their environment. Not only does their environment affect them, but they actually, literally affect their environment through their thoughts, even on a subconscious level.
Yeah. You know how people say, if you want to be a good parent, be a good example.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it might relate to that a little bit.
Yes.
Don't do as I say, do as I do. It might be something like that, even on a psychic level. Your children and your friends and everybody, it isn't just what they see you do, but your thinking is affecting them, and what they probably admire about you, and they can't put it into words, isn't just what they know about you, but they can feel your thoughts.
Yes.
Like when you trust somebody, what are you trusting? You're trusting their judgment. It's completely a thought process.
I agree with that 100%. I've seen it time and time again, both as a paranormal investigator and in personal situations that I've encountered with friends, family, other people. If a person is on edge, if they're always upset or always depressed, the children pick up, even if they haven't mentioned a word about what they're feeling, what their current state of mind is. The children would always, always, always pick up on it. They knew without it being expressed to them, and they acted out on it. So I agree 100% with what you're saying there.
Yeah. So that's psychological, and I think psychology is going to be a bigger area of research than it is now. I think psychology is really going to excel, and at some point it's just going to have to accept parapsychology, because
Yes.
it's going to just find out that these things are just all the same thing. It's just going further with it.
Right. I do believe, because at some point psychology is going to have to accept that the brain works more off of it. It's more than anatomy of the brain, and
Oh, sure.
and and more
I think
than
these things will happen by default. Something will happen, some unknown thing, some logic of events, you know.
right.
And what's really wild is that there's kind of a movie about this that I liked. It was called Hereafter, directed by Clint Eastwood of all things. I don't know if you ever saw it. Hereafter.
I haven't seen that one.
I thought it was one of the best movies I've ever seen, and it didn't do well at all. But I would recommend it to your audience because it's totally paranormal. But it's done in a modest way, and it's done in a way that's believable. It doesn't go overboard.
Right.
And what it is you have this lady in the movie who just, she's living a very successful life, and as a celebrity, she's an author, and she's something to do in fashion or something. She's kind of like one of our celebrities now. And she has a near-death experience. She's drowned and has this near-death experience. And when she comes out of that, and she had this experience and she can't explain it, well, she starts explaining it to everybody, and they start walking away from her, and she loses her boyfriend, and her job is the same, and they don't want her on the job anymore. She has one guy who helps her a little bit. Her book agent sees that she's going in a different direction, so he directs her to, maybe you should write about this. But anyway, it's very interesting to see the psychological changes she goes through in the movie, and I would recommend it to everybody. And ironically, Matt Damon's in that movie too.
I've never seen it, but that definitely sounds. It sounds like an awesome movie. I'm going
Oh,
to have to check into
I've
that.
seen it 3 times. It's so good. I mean, I didn't
But
pay for it 3 times. I thought I saw it 3 times on. I think I saw it once in the theater, and then I saw it on television a couple times. You know, it might even be on somebody's. What do they call it? What do they call it? I think on demand.
right,
Yeah, it might be on there on demand.
that
Probably is.
um when you were talking about that, that's near death experiences are that's a subject that's very near and dear to me because I had one as a child,
Oh my gosh.
and
Well, no wonder you're so into this stuff.
that you're exactly right. That what I experienced then compared, I've always been very curious about the unknown. And then on
Mm-hmm.
top of that, I was always loved history, always loved science. I was that kid that never did any homework but made hundreds on every one of my science tests. Drove my teachers crazy. They
Really? Wow.
right. And but when when I was a child, I was going in for surgery, and I had a severe reaction to anesthesia, and
Mm.
it caused me to go into cardiac arrest, and my heart actually stopped.
Mm.
It took them 6.5 minutes to get me resuscitated,
Mm.
to the point of the doctor was ready to give up, pronounce me dead.
Mm.
Um, During this experience, I, I've seen there's a show I believe it used to come on. I think it used to come on A&E or the no, it used to come on the
Yeah.
Biography channel, I believe.
Okay.
It was uh, I survived, or something like that. Beyond and back, maybe. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so maybe someone in the chat remembers the show that I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it was something about I survived beyond and back. I think was the name of the show,
Mm-hmm.
and came on a few years ago. And it was about people describing their near-death experiences. And a lot of the doctors would talk about they would have the experience of the tunnel of light, and they would say that it was synapses in the brain firing off from the lack of
Mm-hmm.
oxygen, hallucination, blah blah blah.
Uh-huh.
The
Mm-hmm.
one that I had was nothing like that.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
had the sensation of, I talked about floating in the room
Mm-hmm.
and looking down and seeing everything that was happening. When
Mm-hmm.
when they got me resuscitated, I described in perfect detail everything that happened to me while I was flatlined, including the doctor being ready to pronounce me dead and the nurse begging him to try to resuscitate me one more time, and him doing it, and
Mm-hmm.
that being when my heart started again.
Mm. Wow.
So,
Wow. By the way, what you just said, are you done with that?
yes. Yes.
I was going to say, when I started the conversation with you earlier, we were talking about either or, either you're a believer or a skeptic, and you tend to see things, one way or the other. This is the way it is too. With uh, the scientists who don't want to accept near-death experiences, they're going to say it's just, it's just a bunch of your wires going nuts and firing off in the brain,
Hmm.
and that's their side of it. That's the way they see it, and not a whole lot you can do about it. Then you have your believers over here, and the way they see it, it isn't that. It's a real experience, and that's the way it is. So you have these two channels going all the time. It seems to be human existence has this binary thing going all the time, the either or thing, especially in our culture. You believe this or that. When really there's third and fourth and fifth levels of explanation that have nothing to do with either or it's a completely different thing. And it's just a funny thing. And I hope psychology addresses that too. Because
Right.
I think skeptics are wired differently than believers. They're wired differently.
Right. That's why when I see or hear these skeptics that talk about the near death experiences, that what the
Mhm.
people who go through those, what they experience during them isn't real. That's
Yeah.
why I have to disagree. That's
Well,
because
you're
how
going to have you just. It's always going to be that way. You're always going to have these
right,
two camps.
right,
The movie Contact brought that out. Remember, Jodie Foster had this terrific experience, and she was a scientist. And she came back and told everybody about it. They didn't see it. They didn't believe it. So, gee, they sent her there. They sent her on this mission, and then she comes back and tells them about the mission, and they don't believe it. It's approach avoidance. It's strange, you know. But you always are going to have this.
yes, that
And there was also actually a religious fanatic in that movie that
hmm
blew up something because he didn't want to find out that there was any life other than the Earth. And that was another thing they had going on in the movie too. It was kind of wild. There's some people in their religious beliefs that thinks that God only made life on the Earth. There isn't life any other place. So they
right,
they would sabotage anybody from finding out differently. You
right,
know.
right. With the argument against the near death experiences, uh, if every person who went through one, it was all the tunnel. If every single experience was the tunnel of light, something like that, the fog, the remembering people that you knew in your life, that sort of thing,
Yeah. Yes.
then I could, I might be kind of skeptical. But I've heard too many accounts of stories like mine where
Oh, right.
there's people
Right.
see things that they couldn't know because they are not conscious. They are
Well,
clinically
I
dead.
talked to I talked to one guy who was a former atheist, and well, actually, I talked to several former atheists, but he had a near-death experience, and he says I can't tell anybody about it. I can't tell anybody at work. I can't tell my children. I can't tell my wife. I certainly can't tell my friends. Uh, so I tell them one thing, I'll tell you another thing. I had this experience. It's just it's a funny thing. It's startling. It's startling. And there's a funny thing about near-death experiences too. It seems that defense mechanisms, generally speaking, do not interfere with a near-death experience. And or actually, Spindrift has kind of a humorous theory about that. Uh, we feel that the defense mechanisms feel that the person's going to pass away anyway. They're not going to be resuscitated. So let them have this experience because who are they going to tell?
Right.
Can't tell it anyway. Then the defense mechanisms are double crossed and the person's resuscitated and they come back and they remember everything. They remember a lot of things anyway. It's kind
Right.
of funny. So the defense mechanisms have been tricked.
Right.
Kind of like that Italian joke. The Italian parents tell their children to don't have sex before marriage. Whatever you do, don't have sex before marriage because all the saints are going to watch and all your elders are going to watch you from heaven when you're having sex. So don't have sex. So the children get together and they say, well, if that's true, who are they going to tell? You know.
that's that's a good
You
that's, um you know and you brought up another good point too about about us being alone in the universe and the skeptics
Mhm.
versus believers. That's
Yes.
you know I can't help but believe that you know I there's obviously so many varied opinions on that. Now, I'm skeptical about a lot of accounts that I hear,
Hmm.
but mathematically, it is nearly impossible for that to work out to be
Right.
true, that for us to be alone in the universe.
Right. Right. And we'll
And
find that out someday. You know, we'll find it
right,
out someday. I just hope that that these other planets haven't advanced so much with their weapons that they blew themselves up, so we won't see them. That's what I'm kind of worried about.
Right. And well, I can't help but kind of wonder about that meme that I've seen going around. That the reason that we don't see more of them, or they haven't actually landed or whatever, is because it's kind of like the meme says. Every time they fly over, last month they were lobotomizing turkeys. This month they're lobotomizing pumpkins. This month they're
Oh yeah.
this month
Well,
they're
it could be. It could very well could be that they um, could be either that they're so different that we don't see them, or they don't see us, or maybe they see us but we're not allowed to see them. Who knows? But I know in the demonic area, we don't see demons, but they're around. I mean, do you remember Jesus saw demons as like physical people? He could see them like and other people see them. So there very well could be other presences here from other planets, and we just don't recognize them. Or in some cases, they might be hiding as human beings. And then, how would you know who you're talking to? Some people look like walk-ins. You look at them; they do look strange.
Right, and it's funny. When I remember the first time I watched Men in Black, I couldn't help but wonder, what if? Because if you remember, there's that one part in Men in Black where he's explaining how many aliens are on the planet at any given time, and it shows a screen. You see, I think, Newt Gingrich and Dennis Rodman and, all these celebrities and all these cab drivers and stuff. It's like, well, that would explain a lot.
Yeah. After 9/11, I write this in the book, but after 9/11, a UFO expert friend of mine wrote me an email, and I said, this is so good I have to put it in the book. He said, who needs outer space and aliens invading the Earth when we have Muslim terrorists? Right. I thought that was really... yeah, I had to put it in the book. It's really wild. We have a lot of things here on the Earth, a lot of strange people right here on the Earth. Maybe some of them are aliens, or maybe we don't even need aliens. There's people acting like them. They're taking the part. They've taken on the part. It's going to be interesting to see what comes up too. The guy who started Tesla, what's his name? Musk. The guy who started Tesla Motors. He said in 10 years, this was on the news yesterday, and he's really into this movie, The Matrix. I like The Matrix too, but he thinks in 10 years the machines are going to take us over, and start deciding who's going to live and die and controlling us and everything. I thought that was really wild. I was surprised that didn't make the headlines. Did you hear about that?
I seen it briefly on it. It showed up on my news ticker on my Google News.
Well, I would have thought that would have really made the headlines. I mean, he has a lot of credibility.
Right, and you would think that would be, right up there. But yeah, it did. The only thing I seen of it was it flashed across my news ticker, and that was about all I seen of it.
Well, maybe the machines are the aliens for the time being. Wow. Wow. The future is going to be weird. We can be sure of that.
Right. It kind of makes you wonder how far off James Cameron was with Terminator and some of those.
It really does. In fact, I could tell you stories about that. I think things like that are coming. We certainly have to. I don't know what we're going to do, because I think we're going to get to the point where the machines are going to be smarter than us and stuff. And then what? Is man that great then?
Right.
Are we going to become their pets?
It makes you wonder. It definitely does.
Yeah. So this brings back to Spindrift in the sense that we should preserve spirituality and spiritual consciousness and the quality of thought, because we certainly wouldn't want to see these things go out of existence, because they're the things that beautify existence and bring existence together in a harmonious way.
Right.
And the world can always use more beauty and qualitative thought. And
Yes.
I don't think the machines can do that. That's something they won't be able to do. And if we could learn these things, just like we learn music or dance, that we could learn these spiritual skills for our consciousness, then we can start seeing that our intentions and our prayers will actually do some good in the world. And we hope that the Spindrift experiments will suggest, the results of the test will suggest that these things are real. These are real possibilities. These aren't just people expressing beliefs or rituals, but there's actually something happening. It's subtle, but it's still in effect. It's still having an effect. And over time, it's like the Chinese torture of drip, 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 drip water. Over time, spirituality dripping away has a huge effect on pushing culture forward.
Well, no, if I'm, and I'm not sure if this would quite be completely relevant or not, but much like meditation, um, kind of in the example that you used, um, many people who try to meditate for the first time are horrible at it.
Right.
It
It's a practice skill.
right, but the more that they practice, the more effective they become at it, the more productive their meditation is.
Right.
And meditation is something that is scientifically proven. There's not.
Isn't that interesting? There's a lot of evidence for that. Yeah.
Right,
And that's sort of accepted. That's sort of accepted. Prayer is not accepted as scientifically proven, but meditation is. Meditation, because it's more closely tied into the nervous system. That's something they can see as physical. Is accepted.
Right. So, and you won't find a psychiatrist or a psychologist or a therapist or counselor, whatever, that will not recommend meditation as a good technique for relaxation, for helping with depression, with anxiety, with many things that are going on. And so we see the positive effects of that, and we know that that is a skill that is learned. And
you got it. That's what I'm trying to say. We should think about. They're building up the unconscious mind with meditative skills.
right. So it only makes sense what you're saying about prayer. How
And you just think about how that's changed. I mean, I don't know how many years ago, let's say 30 years ago, the idea that meditation could be brought into psychiatry or the medical profession like that, it would be considered quackery.
right.
So look at the paradigm shift there.
Right. Well, and something that I say all the time is, you know, science is, for anybody who thinks that science is set in stone, is dead wrong. Science is fluid and ever changing. It, you know, 500 years ago, the Earth was the center of the universe. 1,000 years ago, the world was flat, and that was the scientific facts at the time. And we see how that turned out. So,
Yeah, we saw that. Yeah. But I'll tell you a funny story. In England, there's still a flat Earth society that believes the world's flat. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
Yeah, they still believe it.
Wow.
And when John Glenn, last time I heard about it was when John Glenn went around the Earth 3 times. I think that was the last time I heard about it. They said they might reconsider.
Wow.
But I mean, you can believe something so strongly. Doesn't matter what the evidence is. It's the way it is. I mean, there have been skeptics I've heard speak, and I've talked to a couple myself. They've described to me basically miraculous things that happen to them.
Right.
And they just don't believe that there's a force for good behind it. And their excuse for that is interesting. I think they get together and they seem to say the same thing. They say, can't I just enjoy the experience without trying to think that there's a God behind it or a creator behind it or a reason behind it? Can I just enjoy the experience and not go any further into it than that? That's the line they give you. So, well, I guess you have the right to do that, sure. But I would want to know what's behind it, So it's a different kind of curiosity I have than they have, I guess.
Well, and even regardless of religion, even Einstein himself said that God reveals himself in nature.
Yeah, I guess that he said something like that, didn't he?
Hmm.
Yeah, he said a lot of interesting things. Interesting about Einstein, you'd be interested in this, a trivia fact. Albert Einstein was interested in two religions.
Hmm.
One was the Quakers, and the other was Christian Science. He had a
Hmm.
lot of interest in Christian Science. Isn't that interesting?
Hmm.
That's just something not very many people know.
Right. Right.
Uh, and to say he was an atheist, well, yeah, not exactly. He was not a theist. He didn't believe in a anthropomorphic God, but he saw God more as a universal mind,
Right.
which is not theism. But I would see it that way too. You know, God's all intelligence, fills all space with ideas. I mean, that seems reasonable. That seems to be a reasonable way to view God, rather than a human being being God. A lot of people want to see God as a human being, so
Right.
that's where they are. That's better. I think that's better than no belief in God, but that's where they are. I think as the when you study religion, especially in ancient times, God was all kinds of things. He was a stone, he was a rock, he was a mountain, he was the sun, he was the stars, all these polytheism and everything. And then the Jewish people came in and make an advancement. They saw him as the one tribal God, the singular mono God for the tribe of Israel. But it was a tribal God. It wasn't anybody else's God. It was just for the tribes of Israel.
Right.
And then as religion progressed and Christianity came along and other religions progressed, you started seeing that the tribal God of Israel became the universal God for the earth.
Hmm.
And then this word universal has to be stretched out now because we see the cosmos as more than the earth.
Right.
The whole universe is a lot bigger than what we thought the word universal meant. It's the cosmos that seems to be infinite, so we have to progress too and see God beyond the God for this earth, even not just the God for the whole cosmos. So it seems that God as an intelligent mind with a capital M seems to be progress of religion, getting away from the human element.
Right. Right. And
So,
oh, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, and I believe that thought process in itself, I think that that's one of the places where science kind of clashes with a lot of, or excuse me, I'm going to say where religion clashes with a lot of the scientific aspects, because
You're
it's
right.
it seems like that takes it that takes what they've always taught as, whether it be Christianity, Hinduism, Buddhism,
Mm-hmm.
whichever
Mm-hmm.
religion you're talking about, it takes their traditional deity out of its traditional context.
Yes, very well put. And expanding it. Don't expand it, please. Leave
Right.
it where it is. We like a colloquial God.
Right. Right.
It's funny. And of course, it is a natural human tendency for any of us. None of us like to change our ideas when something better comes along. We're all stubborn usually. Uh, I can remember, and I think I'm not the only one in the audience. I can remember when people kind of laughed at the idea that there'd be a computer in every house. I can actually remember that. I didn't believe it.
Right.
And now a computer is about as common as a thermostat.
Right. Well, most, and the thing of it is, 99% of people, for a practical sense, carry one in their pocket.
Well, that's true, isn't it? It's wild. So everything has to expand out. And I think that's what God wants us to do. He wants us to expand our ideas of the universe. He's an infinite God, and if we're going to understand, we have to start thinking in terms of
Hmm.
infinite possibilities. And this would also include parapsychology, infinite possibilities of thought. Why limit ourselves just because somebody says it isn't true? You know,
Right.
how many things have been said in the past that people said they weren't true that are true now?
Right. And that's why that's exactly, you know what, that's exactly what drives me. There's so many things that are unknown, and
Right.
I have that curiosity that and that's what drove me into the paranormal field was
Yeah. Well,
I
you hit on a
believe
real. Yeah.
I believe what's paranormal, so to speak, today, I believe within my lifetime won't be paranormal.
Really.
I believe that, or I won't say that all of it will be explained,
Mm-hmm.
but I believe
Mm-hmm.
that there are a lot of things that are considered paranormal today that before my lifetime is over will not be considered paranormal anymore.
But it's funny you mentioned that. One of the tests that we wanted the skeptics to test for the prize money, when all these there's several skeptic organizations that put out money prizes, including James Randi, and
Right.
there's several. Actually, there's several of them. And when we presented one of our experiments to one of them, and we explained it to them, and then of course Bruce and John Klingbeil, the founders of Spindrift, explained it to them. And they explained it in real good scientific lingo and everything, just the way, it left a lot of the mystery out of it, so it really looked like it was scientific. Well, the answer to them was, well, if that turns out to be true, then it won't actually be paranormal. It'll just be part of the scientific nomenclature, and it'll be a scientific discovery. So we couldn't give
Yes.
you the prize money because you just found out something new for science.
Right.
So they had an escape. They had an escape outlet to keep their money. Yeah, we thought that was really interesting. I mean, they would have to acknowledge it if it actually worked out the way it was being described, but they wouldn't say at that point it wouldn't be paranormal. It was just a new discovery of science.
Right.
I'm going to keep my money. And that actually happened once to James Randi. He tested. There's a guy who made a claim. He was thought to be so crazy, James Randi and the skeptics thought it was a paranormal claim. It had to be crazy. There was I think it was an MD. I have to go back and investigate. Some guy in California claimed that you could hand him any record album, one of these LPs, and he could look at it, and by looking at the grooves, he could tell you what was playing on it.
Oh wow.
He could tell you the kind of music it was, and it just seemed to be a crazy thing. Well, they went and they tested the guy, and he called it. He could tell you what the music was: classical music, it was rock and roll, it was jazz. He could call it. And they tried to trick him up because they gave him one. And they would cover the labels up. Everybody couldn't see the labels. And they covered
Right.
one up, and they tried to trick him up and says, what's this music about? He says, well, this isn't music. This is talking. And it turned out that it was a recording of magic tricks, how to do magic tricks. It was a guy talking.
Wow.
So then the guy showed he could do it, but they said, well, this is a physical experiment, not a paranormal experiment. It's taking place in the physical realm. Completely physical, so can't have the money.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I guess it was physical, but isn't that wild? It's funny, how many people know about that? And that guy beat he beat him, but
Yep. So
didn't
that's
collect any money. Oh, it's just a funny thing. It's a funny thing. And paranormal, there's strange things that happen in paranormal. I don't know if you've had this experience, but Spindrift has. Somebody will have this terrific psychic experience, or they'll even have a spiritual healing. I mean, my gosh, they're prayed for, and they have this healing, and it's documented and all this. Or they take the Spindrift test, and in a few cases they took Spindrift test and you didn't talk to them for a couple of years. And then when you talk to them later about it, they just kind of go berserk on you and say, "Oh, that never happened. Oh, that didn't happen. I don't remember that." Have you ever had that? It's a strange thing. I mean, it's the defense mechanism, of course, but it's really something. Some people can have paranormal experiences, but they don't want to explain it paranormally, so they explain it to, oh yeah, couldn't have been this dramatic, or I was emotional then, or I don't remember that,
Right.
or it really wasn't paranormal. It was actually probably something that I couldn't explain at the time. It was probably something that could be explained through natural explanations.
I have had similar occurrences before.
Yeah.
I have
It's
run into
really
that.
funny. It's really kind of, it's
Uh,
really, that's why it's so important for everything to be documented so people can go back and see. I'll tell you something happened to me recently. Um, I used to be a professional drummer. And when I was a kid in high school, I got a bunch of this Buddy Rich drum clinic down in Chicago. The great drummer, Buddy Rich. And a professional drummer friend of mine last week found a picture of me at this drum clinic, and I'm right there in the front row, right by Buddy Rich. Now I remember being there and everything, but what I didn't remember is that he was smoking a cigarette. I do not remember him smoking a cigarette as he was talking to us at all. But there he is in the picture. So we forget details. We do forget
Right.
details of things. And I thought I would remember that for one thing. I hate cigarette smoke, so I thought maybe I'd have a. But I was so wrapped up in being in the presence of the king of drums that I didn't remember. I was so startled by it. So we do forget details. So it's so important to keep a record of things that happen to us because we do forget things. The mind has a tendency to forget things. The mind works that way. Every time you remember, you forget things slip away. But in the paranormal, they really slip away.
Definitely.
You only have your slipping memory to work with. Everybody has that problem. You have the defense mechanisms that are jumping in and trying to sabotage everything they can that you've experienced. So
Absolutely.
it's best to write things down immediately.
Absolutely. That is very well said because and not only for the person or like the client involved, but for anyone investigating the paranormal as well. That is critical.
Yeah. 5 minutes out, the experience is going to become a different experience. You've got to keep praying it right away. That's why surprise is so important. If you can do things in a spontaneous, surprise way, you can elicit paranormal effects. I think this is why one of the reasons children are so good at paranormal things. Everything to them is wonder and surprise.
Right.
And when you have that, a surprise element, and wonderment, something new, the defense mechanisms don't quite know what to do with that because they usually have something to monitor. They can see the build up to it and the expectation to it. But if something's sudden, they're not ready. They're caught off guard.
Right. So anyway, we're getting down to just a few minutes left. Your book, A Journey into Prayer,
It's doing real well.
that tell us a little bit about it and how someone can get a copy of it.
Well, if they go to the Spindrift website, spindriftresearch.org, hit book news at the top there. There's a press release that describes the book, and there's also two links. There's a link to Amazon.com, and there's a link to Ex-Libris, which is my publisher. You get a little better deal from Ex-Libris. And you can read the book reviews, of course, on Amazon. But I would hope that people go to the Ex-Libris link, because they don't get as many sales from my publisher as they do from Amazon. My publisher likes to get some direct sales.
Right.
The book is hardcover, softcover, and on Kindle. And the book covers the story of Spindrift, experiences we've had with other researchers, the implications of the research, and a lot of interesting background and sociology. Some of these crazy experiences that happened to Spindrift people against the research. So that seems to be the thing that interests people. Also, I have, nobody knows who I am. I'm the PN, basically. So I have these 18 experts who have given me wonderful write-ups for the book. Several famous parapsychologists and writers, Joan Borishenko, Larry Dawsey, Deepak Chopra, several other people who are head of different organizations, Princeton University Lab. And I have separated the book into two parts because I have taken writing courses and I realize that writing has changed a lot today, just like people are watching videos and movies more than they're reading.
Right.
In writing, people don't read, not everybody, but if you're a book reader, great. But generally, people have a shorter attention span. So much is going on in the world today. So I split the book up a little differently. If you start on page 330 where it says the Spindrift Files, and look for the chapter called the Spindrift Files, if you read from there to the end, that's a kind of a reduced sense of what the whole book is like. If you don't have a whole lot of time to read the whole book, that is a condensed version, kind of written for the internet line today. Spindrift Files to the end. But if you want to read the whole story, start at the beginning of the book. But I would actually have been finding that people actually like to read that book that way. They like to get a primer. They read the Spindrift Files to the end of the book, then they go back to the beginning of the book. Some people tell me they really like doing it that way. So I'll listen to people. They're talking to me about reading the book, so I'll give that out as advice. So it's kind of a unique way to write a book and read a book.
Right.
And so we have, by the way, the word spindrift refers to spray out in the ocean at the top of a wave. It's being blown around by the heavy winds. That's called spindrift. And the Spindrift Research is on the edge of consciousness, and so it's a very turbulent area. So that's where they got the idea of calling it Spindrift Research.
That's quite clever.
Yeah, I thought it was kind of cool. I never heard the word before I met him. It's in the dictionary. I never even heard the word before. Had you?
I had, but only because I live close to the Gulf of Mexico and fairly close to the Atlantic Ocean, so I've been around the beach quite a bit.
Oh, good for you. Aren't you? That's a great place to live.
Right, so.
Yeah, so I've had a lot of fun, and I think you are too. And I would say that I hope these things happen in your lifetime. I actually think it's going to take longer, but it will happen. And there's a lot of things that are going to happen that are unexpected. There'll be a lot of things happen.
Right, so.
Can't even anticipate.
Right, so it's been great having you on the show, and hopefully I can get you back on the show again sometime before long.
Okay, great. You did a great job, and hello to everybody in the audience. If you have any questions, you can reach me through the www.spindriftresearch.org website. If you find anything in the book you find confused, let me know. By the way, the book also has a chapter on experiments. That's in the apocalypse. Oh, brother, the appendix. The apocalypse. How do you like that one? And then I thought that must have been my unconscious mind, huh?
Right.
Yeah, and also there's an index where you can look up the terms and subjects you're interested in. Well, thank you very much.
Well, thank you for coming on. And I will say, from looking over the research myself, it is absolutely fascinating. And I've learned a lot tonight, and I hope everyone listening has learned a lot. So I appreciate everyone for tuning in tonight, and I hope that you all have a good night tonight, and look forward to seeing you next week. So once again, thank you, Bill, for coming on, and have a good night, everyone.
Thank you for listening to Paranormalities and Ponderings with the C.A.S.P.I.R Paranormal team, brought to you by the Paranormal King Radio Network. We hope you enjoyed the show, and will tune in again next Tuesday at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 8 p.m. Central Standard Time. Please be safe as you're out there, especially if you're investigating the paranormal. Take care, have a good night, and happy huntings. Thank you again from the C.A.S.P.I.R Paranormal team.